Welcome back, everyone, to Episode 4 of Communication for Leadership and Influence. I'm Yogesh, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Lily.
Hello again. Today we're diving into one of the most powerful yet underrated tools in a leader's communication toolkit, storytelling.
That's right, we often think of storytelling as something for writers or marketers, but the truth is, the best leaders are often the best storytellers.
Yes, because facts inform, but stories move people. They make messages memorable, they create emotional connection, and most importantly, they help people care.
Exactly. When leaders tell stories, they bring abstract ideas to life. Vision becomes tangible. Values become real. Strategies become human.
So let's begin with a question. Why do stories work so well in leadership communication?
Great question. Neuroscience gives us the answer. Our brains are wired for stories. When we hear a story, multiple regions of our brain light up, not just the language centers. We experience stories.
Yes, and that experience builds empathy. It creates resonance. That's why a personal story about overcoming a challenge connects more than a PowerPoint chart showing numbers.
I often say, data convinces, but story converts. You need both, but if you only share numbers, people may understand your logic, but not feel your urgency.
So true. Now, when we talk about storytelling in leadership, we don't mean making things up or being overly dramatic. We mean using real, relevant narratives to inspire and influence.
Right, and the best leadership stories tend to have three parts. A relatable character, often the leader or someone the team knows, a challenge or tension, and a resolution or insight that reinforces the message.
That structure mirrors the hero's journey, right? The classic arc of transformation.
Exactly. And in leadership, the hero isn't always the leader. It can be a customer, a frontline employee, or the whole team.
Let's give an example. Imagine a CEO addressing their team about resilience after a tough quarter. They could say, "We need to bounce back and stay committed." Or they could tell a story.
Something like, let me tell you about Anika from our support team. Last month, she handled a customer who was ready to cancel. Instead of following the script, she listened. She stayed late. She got engineering on the line. That customer not only stayed, they upgraded. That's what resilience looks like. That's what we're about.
That's so much more compelling. One story, one real person can represent an entire culture.
Exactly. And stories don't need to be long. Sometimes 2 sentences can be a story. It's about meaning, not length.
Now, let's address something many leaders worry about. I'm not a natural storyteller.
That's a common concern. But storytelling is a skill, not a personality trait. And like any skill, it can be learned.
Let's walk through a simple exercise leaders can use to build their storytelling muscle. We call it the MET framework. Moment, identify a real moment that illustrates your point. Emotion, what emotion was present or triggered. Takeaway, what's the lesson or insight for your audience?
That's brilliant. Let's try it out. Lily, share a Met story.
Okay, moment. A few years ago, I froze during a big presentation. Emotion, I felt humiliated and panicked. Takeaway, that failure taught me to always rehearse with distractions, and it made me more empathetic to people who fear public speaking.
That's so human. And it invites connection. That's the point of leadership storytelling. It builds a bridge between people.
And the more vulnerable and authentic the story, the more powerful the impact. Not every story has to be about success.
Yes, in fact, stories of failure often create more credibility. They show that the leader has grown and that others can too.
Let's talk about how storytelling plays out in different leadership settings. First, team meetings.
A short story can make strategy feel real. Instead of saying, we need to improve customer experience, tell a story of a customer who left due to a bad experience. Let people feel the consequence.
How about during change management?
Perfect time for a story. Here's how we navigated change in the past. Here's what we learned. Here's what we'll do differently now. That shows continuity and confidence.
And don't forget onboarding. New hires should hear the stories of the company, how it started, why it exists, what moments shaped its culture.
Those stories become part of the organizational identity. People remember them more than any policy manual.
Let's give our listeners a practical challenge. Over the next week, identify one story from your own leadership journey. Doesn't have to be dramatic, just honest. Then share it in a meeting or email.
That's a great challenge. And remember to include what happened, why it mattered, and what you learned.
Let's now summarize today's episode.
First, storytelling is a leadership skill that builds emotional connection and inspires action.
Second, use real, relevant stories that reflect your values and vision.
Third, structure your stories around a relatable moment, emotion, and takeaway.
And finally, vulnerability creates credibility. Your story is your bridge to influence.
In our next episode, we're going to talk about influencing when you don't have authority. That's a real test of communication skills.
Yes, influencing across teams, up the hierarchy, or in peer networks without formal power.
Thank you, Lily, and to our listeners. And always keep telling your story and keep leading with heart. If you found this episode of Corporate Communication useful, don't forget to join us, leadershipacademy.tagbizz.sutra. Do share it with your friends and colleagues, and leave your review. Until next time, people may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how your story made them feel.